Some people should just enjoy retirement and stay quiet while the adults discuss real business. My son-in-law smiled as he said it. Several people laughed. A few relatives chuckled. Nobody defended me. Not my sister. Not the people who had known me for decades. Not even the family members who knew exactly how often Jason turned every gathering into a performance about his own success. In that moment, the insult wasn't what hurt most. It was the silence. The quiet agreement hanging over the table as if I had somehow become invisible. As if my only remaining purpose was to smile politely and stay out of the way. Looking back now, that was the moment Jason made the biggest mistake of his life. The problem was that he didn't know it yet. Neither did anyone else in that room. Because before dinner was over, something would happen that none of us could have predicted. A careless assumption would collide with a forgotten piece of history. Someone would ask a question. Someone would recognize something. And the entire balance of power in that family would begin to shift. At the time, though, nobody was paying attention to me. They didn't know why I stayed calm. They didn't know what I refused to talk about. They didn't know why a few old memories still followed me after all these years. They didn't know why one particular phrase had never left my mind. They didn't know why my grandson suddenly seemed uncomfortable while everyone else was laughing. Most of all, they didn't know what was about to happen before that Thanksgiving dinner ended. Before I continue, tell me where you're listening from tonight. And have you ever stayed silent while someone underestimated you? Because there was a reason I didn't argue. A reason I didn't defend myself. And somewhere in that crowded room, one person was already beginning to notice that something didn't fit the story Jason thought he understood. But to understand how that Thanksgiving changed everything, I need to take you back to where it really began. Jason leaned back in his chair and looked toward the smaller table near the window. Maybe Hannah would be more comfortable over there, he said. This conversation is getting a little technical. The room went quiet for half a second. Then Margaret gave a small nod. That might be easier, she said. Less noise. I looked at Emily. Her lips parted, but no words came out. So I stood, picked up my plate, and moved to the side table. Nobody stopped me. Jason smiled like he had solved a problem. From there, I could still hear every word. That was the part he forgot. Men like Jason often believed distance was the same thing as disappearance. He began talking about investments, contracts, expansion, and the kind of people who understood leverage. Success is numbers, he said, tapping the table with 2 fingers. If you cannot measure your value, you probably do not have much. Someone laughed softly. I kept cutting my turkey. Daniel, my grandson, was watching me now. Not Jason. Me. Grandma, he said quietly, are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Jason heard him. See, he said. That generation was taught endurance, not adaptation. A few people laughed harder this time. Emily looked down at her napkin. I could see her discomfort building, but she was still caught between being a daughter and being a wife. I understood that kind of silence. I had lived beside it for years. Then Jason raised his glass. To progress, he said. And to not letting old thinking slow down new opportunities. Margaret smiled. A cousin chuckled. Someone said, that's true. No one looked at me. That was when the room began to feel smaller. Jason turned slightly, making sure I could hear him. The world has moved on, Hannah. Some people just don't realize when they're no longer relevant. I set my fork down. For the first time that evening, I looked directly at him. Not angrily. Not proudly. Just long enough for his smile to weaken. Daniel's eyes moved between us. Then I said, almost under my breath, the last signal. Jason frowned. What does that mean? I did not answer. But Daniel sat up straighter, as if those 3 words had touched something he had heard before and could not quite place. At that moment, I thought the evening could not get more painful. I was wrong. Jason did not ask where I wanted to sit for dessert. He simply began speaking as if the next 10 years of our family had already been arranged. We've been looking at options, he said, folding his napkin beside his plate. Smaller places. Better locations. Less maintenance for everyone. I looked at Emily. Her face changed before she could hide it. What options? I asked quietly. Jason smiled without looking at me. Nothing final, Hannah. Just responsible planning. Margaret leaned forward. It makes sense at your age, she said. A big house can become too much. My house. My life. Discussed like an old chair that needed to be moved out before it became inconvenient. Emily touched Jason's sleeve. Jason, I didn't know you were bringing that up tonight. He gave her a short glance. It's family business. That was the first moment I understood something had already been discussed without me. Not just once. Not casually. Enough for Jason to have phrases ready. Enough for others to nod like they had heard them before. Then he shifted smoothly into another story about an investor dinner in Chicago. You have to know how to read a room, he said. That's what separates leaders from people who just wait for life to happen. Someone asked, and they signed. Jason laughed. Of course they signed. They needed confidence. I gave them confidence. He looked toward the side table. Some people think experience is enough. But experience without relevance is just memory. Daniel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I noticed that. Jason didn't. He was too busy enjoying the sound of his own voice. Then my cousin Ruth said, well, Hannah always had a steady hand. Even when things were hard. It was a small kindness. Not a defense exactly. But it was the first warm thing anyone had said about me all evening. Jason cut it down before it could breathe. Sure, he said. Everyone was useful in their time. The room tightened. Ruth looked embarrassed. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. I kept my hands in my lap. That was how I had survived many rooms in my life. Not by proving myself. By listening carefully to who needed to be heard and who only needed to be watched. Daniel stood and came to the side table with his water glass. Grandma, he whispered, what did you say earlier? I looked at him. What do you mean? Those 3 words. His voice dropped lower. I think I've heard them somewhere. I held his gaze for a second too long. Then I said, some things are better left in the past. But were they real? I did not answer. Across the room, Jason raised his voice again. The truth is simple, he said. If someone isn't creating value now, they shouldn't have much say in what comes next. Several relatives nodded. Slowly. Carefully. As if Jason had given them permission to believe something cruel. I looked around that room and saw how far I had been pushed from the center of my own family. Daniel was still watching me. Emily was watching Jason. And Jason was watching everyone else follow him. At that moment, I understood I had almost no allies left. What I did not know yet was how much worse it would become once they stopped insulting me and started making decisions for me. The chair beside me stayed empty. Not physically. There were coats on it, a purse hanging from the back, a child's toy tucked near one leg. But no one came to sit there. Across the room, Jason kept talking, and every important sentence seemed to happen without me. We should think practically, he said. Holidays, travel, property, responsibilities. These things need structure. Margaret nodded. Emily rubbed her temple. I waited for someone to ask, Hannah, what do you think? No one did. That was when I understood isolation does not always look like being alone. Sometimes it looks like being surrounded by people who have quietly stopped needing your voice. Then Ruth mentioned an old family Christmas. Remember when Emily got that scholarship, she said. Jason, you should have seen how proud everyone was. Jason smiled. She earned it. Always driven. Emily gave a small smile, but I saw her eyes move toward me. No one mentioned the 2 extra shifts I took that winter. No one mentioned the car I sold. No one mentioned the nights I sat at the kitchen table helping Emily fill out applications while pretending I was not exhausted. It was not cruelty, exactly. That would have been easier to name. It was forgetting. Daniel came back to the side table. Grandma, he said softly, why don't you say something? About what? About all of this. I looked at his young face and saw worry there now, not curiosity. Because sometimes speaking only makes people defend the lie harder. He frowned. So you're just going to let them? I don't need you to defend me, Daniel. But somebody should. That nearly broke me. Not because he was wrong. Because he was kind. I touched his wrist. Kindness is not the same as taking sides. Be careful with both. He did not look satisfied. He glanced back toward Jason, then toward the hallway where a few phones had been left charging. I knew that look. He had decided silence was not enough. I looked down at my plate and realized I had barely eaten. For the first time that evening, I thought about leaving. Quietly. Without making a scene. Without giving Jason another stage. I reached for my purse. Then I heard Jason's voice from the kitchen doorway. After tonight, we need to move faster. Before she changes her mind. Emily whispered, Jason, not now. I froze with my hand still on the strap. And that was when I understood the evening had not even reached its real betrayal yet. I stayed near the hallway with my hand on my purse, not moving, not breathing too loudly. Jason's voice carried from the kitchen. She needs guidance, he said. That's all I'm saying. At some point, families have to make decisions before problems become expensive. Margaret answered quietly. She has always been independent. That's part of the problem, Jason said. Independence becomes stubbornness when someone can't see the bigger picture. I felt the words land one by one. Not because they were loud. Because they sounded rehearsed. Then a cousin said, So what exactly are you proposing? Jason lowered his voice, but not enough. We start with the house conversation. Then the paperwork. Emily agrees it's time to simplify things. My fingers tightened around the strap of my purse. Emily whispered, I didn't say it like that. But you agreed, Jason said. There it was. The sentence that made me stand completely still. Not because Jason had said it. Because Emily did not deny it. I stepped back just enough to stay hidden behind the corner. Jason continued. Hannah shouldn't be involved in every major decision anymore. She gets emotional. She holds on to the past. You all saw tonight how disconnected she is. Margaret sighed. I don't like saying it, but maybe he's right. A small sound escaped Emily. Mom is not disconnected. Jason answered too quickly. Then why does she refuse to talk like a normal person? Why make strange comments at dinner? Why sit there like a martyr? No one corrected him. No one said I had been pushed to that side table. No one said he had mocked me first. No one said silence can be dignity when a room has already chosen its verdict. I looked toward the dining room. Ruth was staring at her coffee. Another relative avoided my eyes. That was when I understood this had not started tonight. The empty chair. The prepared phrases. The careful nods. The concern that sounded too polished. They had been moving me out of my own voice long before they tried to move me out of my own home. Emily said, Jason, please. She's my mother. I know, he said. That's why I'm handling this. You're too emotional. I waited. I waited for my daughter to say no. I waited for her to step out of that kitchen and find me. I waited for the child I had raised to remember who had stood beside her before anyone else did. But Emily only said, not tonight. Not no. Not stop. Not you're wrong. Just not tonight. That was the moment something inside me became very quiet. I did not want revenge. I did not want a scene. I simply understood that explaining myself to people who had already reduced me to a problem would only give them more words to twist. So I released the strap of my purse and returned to the side table. Across the room, Daniel had my phone in his hand. He looked up at me, pale and startled. Grandma, he whispered, why is this phrase in an old article? Before I could answer, Jason walked back into the room smiling. And I knew the night had just changed direction. Daniel did not hand me the phone right away. He looked down at the screen, then back at me, as if the woman sitting at the side table had suddenly become someone he did not fully recognize. Grandma, he whispered, this is the same phrase. I kept my voice low. Daniel, put the phone away. But it says almost nothing, he said. Just a reference. A date. Then the rest is blocked out. I felt my chest tighten, not from fear, but from memory. That is enough, I said. He did not move. Across the room, Jason was laughing again, completely unaware that the air had changed behind him. "What are you two whispering about?" he called. Daniel locked the screen quickly. "Nothing." Jason smirked. "Good. I thought maybe Hannah was giving leadership advice." A few people laughed. I looked at my grandson and shook my head once. Not anger. A warning. But Daniel had already seen too much to let it go. He slipped into the hallway and began searching again. I could hear the soft tapping of his thumbs. Every few seconds, he paused, then tried a different phrase. Later, he told me almost everything led nowhere. Old mentions. Broken links. Archived pages. Files with titles, but no contents. Records that looked as if someone had closed a door and left only the shadow of it behind. Then he found my name. Not clearly. Not completely. Just enough. Hannah Reed. A date. And the same phrase that had made him go pale. Before he could come back to me, the front door opened. One of Jason's business guests had arrived late, a tall man in a dark coat with a quiet, careful manner. Jason immediately stood. "Glad you made it," he said. "We were just discussing strategy." The man nodded politely, but his attention shifted when Daniel said too loudly, "Grandma, why would your name be connected to the last signal?" The room stopped. Not slowly. All at once. The man near the door turned toward me. His face changed first. Then his posture. He looked at me not like a guest looking at an old woman, but like someone recognizing a name he had never expected to hear in a family dining room. Jason frowned. "Do you two know each other?" The man ignored him. He took one careful step toward me. "If you've stayed with this story this far, then you already know the truth is never what it first appears to be." Then he lowered his voice. "Ma'am," he asked, "are you talking about the last signal?" The man's question settled over the room like a glass breaking in slow motion. I looked at him for a long moment. Jason gave a short laugh. "I'm sorry," he said. "What exactly is happening here?" The man did not look at him. His eyes stayed on me. "Ma'am," he said again, softer this time, "were you referring to the last signal?" I folded my hands in my lap. That name should not be spoken lightly. His face tightened. "No, ma'am. It should not." That was the first time anyone in that room heard respect in another man's voice when he spoke to me. Daniel stepped closer, holding my phone. "I found this," he said. "But most of it is blacked out." The man glanced at the screen. Then he looked back at me. "That record is restricted." Jason's smile faded a little. "Restricted how?" The man finally turned toward him. "In a way most people in this room would not be able to access." No one laughed. Daniel swallowed. "So it's real?" The man nodded once. "It is real." Emily brought one hand to her mouth. Margaret whispered, "Hannah." I did not answer. The man took another careful step forward. "There are still parts of that operation that are not public," he said. "Some files remain sealed. Some names were protected. Some decisions were never attached to the people who made them." Jason frowned. "Operation." The words sounded strange coming from him. Small. Unprepared. The man ignored the interruption. "What your grandson found is only a fragment," he said. "But that fragment should not exist in an ordinary search." Daniel looked at me, and I saw the fear in his face turn into awe. "Grandma," he whispered, "what did you do?" I kept my eyes on the table. "Daniel, not everything from the past belongs at Thanksgiving dinner." The man's voice lowered. "With respect, ma'am, this may no longer be just a family conversation." The room seemed to contract around those words. Jason stood straighter. "Hold on. Are you saying Hannah was involved in something official?" The man looked at him then, really looked at him. "I am saying Mrs. Reed's name appears in connection with a classified historical file for a reason." Mrs. Reed. Not Hannah. Not Grandma. Not the old woman at the side table. Mrs. Reed. Emily's eyes filled. "Mom?" The man continued carefully. "There was a crisis. A decision had to be made quickly. The wrong call would have cost lives. A communications network failed during an active operation," he continued. For nearly 7 minutes, nobody knew whether an American team was still alive. Daniel stopped breathing. The man glanced toward me. Mrs. Reed made the final recommendation. Jason stared. What recommendation? The extraction signal. Nobody moved. If she had waited for more confirmation, the rescue window would have closed. He paused. 23 people came home because of that decision. My throat tightened, but I stayed still. He looked at me as if asking permission. I gave the smallest shake of my head. He understood and stopped before saying too much. But he had already said enough. A silence spread through the room, different from the earlier silence. This one did not erase me. This one made people look. Daniel whispered, so she made the call? The man answered after a pause. Yes. Jason's face began to lose color. What kind of call? The man did not answer directly. He only said, the kind that changes what happens to many people afterward. Then he added, and some of those consequences reached further than anyone at this table appears to understand. Jason gripped the back of his chair. Emily looked from him to me, as if seeing both of us clearly for the first time all night. The man turned fully toward the family. The truth is simple, he said. The woman you have been dismissing this evening was once trusted with decisions most people never hear about because others get to live quietly afterward. Several of those 23 people went on to serve their country for decades. He looked around the room. Some became senior leaders. Then his eyes settled briefly on Jason. And some helped build programs, industries, and opportunities that continue benefiting others today. No one moved. No one spoke. Every eye in that room turned toward me. And for the first time that night, Jason understood that the person he had pushed to the side table had been the most important person in the room all along. Jason was the first person to speak. Well, he said, forcing a laugh, obviously, I had no way of knowing any of this. No one answered him. That frightened him more than anger would have. He looked around the room, searching for the same small smiles and nods that had carried him through dinner. They were gone. Margaret stared at the table. Ruth would not meet his eyes. Emily stood with one hand pressed against her chest, looking as if she had just realized the floor beneath her had been moving all night. Jason lifted both hands. Come on, he said. I was speaking generally. We were having a normal family conversation. The man in the dark coat looked at him. Was it normal to move her away from the table? Jason's mouth opened. No words came out. That was when Ruth whispered, we all let that happen. Her voice was small, but the room heard it. Margaret swallowed. I said it might be easier, she said. I thought I was helping. No, Daniel said quietly. You were agreeing. The room changed after that. Not loudly. Not dramatically. It changed the way a door changes when someone finally unlocks it. People began looking at the side table differently. At the empty plate. At my untouched food. At the chair they had allowed me to occupy like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Ruth looked at Jason. You said experience without relevance was just memory. Jason shifted. I didn't mean Hannah specifically. Emily turned toward him. Yes, you did. Her voice shook, but she did not look away. You meant my mother. You meant every quiet thing about her that you never bothered to understand. Jason's face hardened for a second. Then he saw no one standing with him, and the hardness broke. Emily, he said, I was trying to protect us. From what? She asked. From her dignity? He looked at me then. Really looked. Not like a problem. Not like an old woman to manage. Like someone whose silence had suddenly become larger than his voice. I didn't know, he said. I nodded once. No, you didn't. He waited, perhaps expecting me to make that easier for him. I did not. The man in the coat said, not knowing is not always the failure. Refusing to ask can be. Jason lowered his eyes. For the first time that evening, he seemed to understand that the damage had not come from what he did not know about my past. It came from what he had decided about my worth without ever trying to know me at all. I'm sorry, he said. The words sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. He looked at Emily. Then Daniel. then the relatives who had laughed. Finally, he looked back at me. "I am sorry, Hannah." The room waited. I could feel them wanting a clean ending, a soft forgiveness, a moment that would let everyone breathe again. Instead, Daniel pulled out the chair at the center of the table. "Grandma," he said, "please sit here." Emily stepped aside. Margaret nodded through tears. Even Ruth moved my plate back from the side table. I stood slowly. For one moment, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Then I looked at the chair and then at Jason. "No," I said softly. "A seat offered after shame is not the same as respect given before it." No one spoke. And for the first time all night, my silence belonged entirely to me. Jason stayed near the table after everyone else had fallen silent. His hands were no longer moving. "Hannah," he said, "I don't know how to fix what I said." I looked at him. "You cannot fix it tonight." He swallowed. "I was wrong." "Yes," I said quietly. "You were." The room waited for more, but I had no interest in winning. Winning would not put the evening back the way it had been. It would not erase the laughter, or the chair by the window, or the way my daughter had looked down when I needed her to look at me. Emily came toward me slowly. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I let him speak for me." I said nothing. She wiped her cheek. "I think I started seeing you through his eyes. Through everyone else's eyes. And I am so sorry." That hurt more than Jason's apology. Because Jason had underestimated me. Emily had forgotten me. I reached for her hand. "The hardest part was never being insulted," I said. It was realizing the people closest to me no longer saw me clearly. Daniel stood behind her, quiet now. He understood. Maybe not every detail, but enough. I looked around the room. "The last signal was not just something from my past," I said. It was a reminder. Some of the most important things we do in life are done quietly. Without applause. Without explanation. Without anyone knowing what they cost. No one interrupted. Thank you for listening to my story. And if this story leaves you with anything tonight, let it be this. Never assume you know someone's value simply because they no longer talk about their past. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet are carrying sacrifices they never asked to be recognized for.